The 1990s was a gold mine for uneven superhero films, poorly realized characters, and blockbuster blunders. For every gem, you had about 6 movies that destroyed careers or caused glaucoma.
7 million. Never leave the cave without it.
Just get out of here quick.
Is quick enough?
One cannot forget about Joel Schumacher's interpretation of the Batman character with a toy commercial that was Batman and Robin, released only 5 years after Tim Burton's Batman Returns. For every Spawn, Batman and Robin, or Steel, the 90s still crafted some gems with films like 1994's The Crow, 1991's The Rocketeer, the 1993's The Mask of the Phantasm, or today's mostly forgotten hit, 1998's Blade. Today's retrospective will be a deep dive into the 1998 cult classic that is largely forgotten among the MCU's brand and popularity. As usual, if you like the video, be sure to smash the like video and maybe subscribe. Before Marvel had become the gigantic empire it is, landing an epic $4 billion deal with Disney, it went through the 1990s actually being quite the opposite. In fact, most do not realize the company filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in 1996. The company was bleeding cash, losing a lot of its top artists to newly created Image Comics. Comic book sales were in a large decline, and recently released titles like 1999 Captain America and 1989 The Punisher were large flops. The company's poor decisions, loss of a third of its employees, and the creation of grand ideas like Marvel Mania themed restaurants were just a list of reasons why the company's future was incredibly bleak. The studio decided to package Blade, among many other huge names like X-Men and Spider-Man, into an ambitious licensing deal. This sent X-Men to 20th Century Fox, Spider-Man to Sony Pictures, and Blade to New Line Cinemas. Blade had actually been in development years prior to Marvel's descent in 1992, when Marvel Studios and rapper-actor LL Cool J expressed immense interest in creating the anti-hero to the big screen. Thankfully, some years later, David S. Goyer, who has had immense filmography based around the development of superhero characters, was brought in to create the script. Goyer had stated that the New Line Cinema's original idea had Blade as something of a spoof character, but thankfully, Goyer had convinced them the opposite. A dark, atmospheric take on the 70s character that would have been displayed over an epic trilogy. Blade was a character that was created by Marv Wolfman and Gene Colan that first appeared as a supporting character in issue 10 of Tomb of Dracula in 1973. The character was much different than the one adapted for film, seen with bright green jacket, blue pants, and absolutely unnecessary yellow shades. He was a London-born character and was developed as part of a commentary towards blaxploitation films. The character's attitude was much more approachable and everyman-like than what was displayed in the films. Thanks to Goyer's writing and interpretation of the character, as well as bringing on well-known late 80s and early 90s action star Wesley Snipes, the character morphed into something more fitting for the universe. Snipes had beat out famous actors such as Denzel Washington and Lawrence Fishburne for the role, with Goyer quoting that Snipes was absolutely perfect. In time, the character of Blade, much like that with Robert Downey Jr. for Iron Man, would be adapted to the actor's many mannerisms, helped with his layered background with martial arts. Ironically, Wesley Snipes had been heavily interested in adapting Black Panther and was mostly unfamiliar with the character of Blade. Unfortunately, the story with Blade, Wesley Snipes, and David S. Goyer sours and turns into a Jerry Springer episode. Maybe if we ever get to the sequels, I can address all that there is, but for now, let's get back to the film. Filming took place in early 1997 with a budget of around $45 million, which equates to about $80 million in today's world. David Goyer's script was written with the thought of keeping the film light on budget, with him projecting the film's total cost to be around $4 to $5 million. The film was shot in Los Angeles, with numerous sets constructed in an old shampoo factory. The first cut of the film was screened to an audience with a runtime of roughly 140 minutes. It was a complete disaster. The film underwent tons of reshoots, edits, and special effects fixes, including adding the entire climactic sword fight between Deacon and Blade. Stanley, of course, was also to appear in the movie, but his cameo was unfortunately cut. The film went on to bring in $131 million worldwide, 17 of which came on the opening weekend. Critics were a bit more even on the film, with Rotten Tomatoes holding at a 56% and Metacritic a little bit lower at 45%. The critic himself, Roger Ebert, was surprisingly a fan of the film, stating,
"It's a good-looking picture, it has high energy, and the vampire stuff adds just enough detail to give the movie texture. I liked it."
Blade centers on the film's protagonist and title character, Blade, a vampire hunter who just so happens to be a human-vampire hybrid. Blade possesses the abilities of vampires without none of the weaknesses, minus his need to consume blood. Blade is exterminating vampires, and his past eventually crossed with one of LA's notorious vampire gangsters, Deacon Frost, played by Stephen Dorff. Frost, a leader of his faction, is eventually put in his place by the Elder Council of Vampires for trying to incite a full-on human-vampire war. One of the cool elements of the film that I wish was explored a bit was the awareness of vampires by politicians and those who control the pieces, or the higher-ups. Frost is seeking out information on awakening the blood god Lamagra. Of course, in typical fashion, Blade's blood is the key to the puzzle, and unlocking the full potential of being the most powerful vampire. Without a doubt, the strength of the film lies in the anti-hero of Blade. The film's atmosphere, look, and tone are entirely built around the rough edges of the character. Blade is no nonsense.
You don't know me.
Built and bred to fight vampires. His character is a badass, holding his own with an arsenal of weapons and Snipes' well-known martial arts skills. Interestingly enough, his character doesn't belong in either society of humans or vampires. He is the ultimate outcast in every situation, and that adds a layer of fascination to the character who hides out in an abandoned warehouse with an old guy. The old guy, also known as Abraham Whistler, is a pseudo-mentor for Blade. The two interact well because they don't have anything outside of each other and are outcasts with one goal: to eradicate vampires. Whistler, played by Chris Christopherson, is a surprisingly decent character, mostly because his backstory provides motivation for the ridiculousness that is this story's plot. Unfortunately, Whistler's death is entirely premature. Oh, spoiler. But Whistler dies, and honestly, from the first time to my recent rewatch, I've never understood why they killed him. Probably why the character was brought back again, but it makes even less sense to bring him back than it did to kill him, so they should have just kept him alive, but whatever. That also brings me to one of the film's weaknesses, which is Deacon Frost. The MCU has taken much flack, and deservedly so, for focusing on the film's protagonists, but never delivering great villains. Outside of a handful, and I stress handful, most are entirely forgettable. In all honesty, I can't remember half the villains, and if I did, I surely couldn't remember their motivations for being bad. Frost's motivations are pretty clear. He is a vampire by creation, not by birth.
You're not even a pure blood.
And is looked down by the elder vampires. His kind are seen as inferior, and thus creates a dilemma with the power-obsessed Frost, who is tired of playing by human games and by the wishes of the elders.
A born vampire would have the power to regenerate from birth. You must have gotten scarred before you were turned. Isn't that right?
His motivations are quite clear.
The goal, of course, is to be like you. Daywalker.
And while his character isn't something entirely memorable, I think his character is far more interesting than any of these. But I'm sure plenty of people will argue that. Stephen Dorff, who plays Frost, definitely is just chewing scenery and having a blast. It's hard to blame him.
Oh, so it's back to pretending we're human again? Come on, spare me the Uncle Tom routine, okay?
Also, fun fact, apparently Jet Li turned down the role of Deacon Frost to be in Lethal Weapon 4. Honestly, that would have been pretty cool to see. Blade, for the most part, has maintained a sense of a cult phenomenon about it. This became quite apparent due to the large success of Black Panther, released 20 years after Blade came to theaters. Without a doubt, Black Panther has had a large connection to the African culture, but it shocked me how many forgot about Blade and what Blade did to films.
highly anticipated movie starring Chadwick Boseman is the first major superhero movie with a black lead character.
Just think about this for a second. Blade, a rated R film about a black anti-hero, was created during the time of its creator company's bankruptcy and was a massive success to the point it made not one, but 2 sequels before Black Panther was even a thought in the MCU. Blade's cultural impact cannot be stated enough. Hell, the slow motion, crisp action sequences, surreal moments, and the black leather all came a year before The Matrix. Yet, this film remains relatively untalked about compared to its younger MCU family. In the summer of 2019, and what feels like a millennia ago, Disney and Marvel announced the upcoming Blade film to be part of the large slate of new movies for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. When I purchased Blade on 4K, the Best Buy employee asked if the upcoming Blade reboot was something I was excited for. I bluntly said, no. Listen, Ali is one of the finest actors working today and has one hell of a filmography. Unfortunately, the film was announced before a director or even a script was written, something I'm sure is probably normal for superhero movies, but is certainly a rarity with films in general. It was also slightly nodded at by MCU overlord Kevin Feige that any upcoming films created by Marvel outside of Deadpool would carry a PG-13 tag. I can't begin to state how important it is that the rated R tag stays for Blade. As I pointed out to the Best Buy employee, the first 15 minutes of Blade would not happen if it wasn't rated R. The film sets the tone for the disgusting atmosphere and the danger the vampires possess to everyday people. Hell, when I was a kid, I struggled to get through the first 15 minutes because I found it legit terrifying. I absolutely understand Feige is making a film aimed for everyone, because everyone is a lot more money than just a few people. Regardless, in order to truly capture that essence of the character and that tone of that universe, you need to appease the story and the themes in that story. Otherwise, what is the point of making this character? Make no mistake about it, let's just get down to the brass tacks of it. Blade is a killer, and is killing things that eat and consume people. This needs to be rated R. Also, shout out to me for using the phrase brass tacks. Never thought I'd use that, but here we are. Blade is honestly a movie deserving of a lot more credit than it receives. It was greenlit when its parent company was going bankrupt, selling everything it had to keep afloat. It was a film starring a black lead that was brutal and violent. It's an ugly film that made a solid profit and created a trilogy before trilogies were all the rave in the 2000s. To this day, outside of a few special effects shots, the film stands up and is as entertaining as anything you'll see on television. Blade's adaptation to the big screen, with modification from David Goyer, would become how the character would be forever seen, much like Robert Downey Jr. towards Iron Man. His villain had motives and was threatening. His team of Whistler and the female protagonist, Dr. Karen Jensen, actually aided to Blade's plan. Like some of the early MCU films, it carries its own tone and style. It feels otherworldly, but also of this place. It is a visceral film and deserves far more recognition in not only the superhero film community, but the film community as a whole.
Some motherfuckers are always trying to ice skate uphill.
Okay, so I've seen this movie probably 24 times, and I have no idea what this means.
Some motherfuckers are always trying to ice skate uphill.
Like, ice skating uphill is hard, so why do it? Who is ice skating uphill? Like, do people actually ice skate uphill?
Some motherfuckers are always trying to ice skate uphill.
Is there a place that you can ice skate uphill? Isn't like ice skating usually flat? How does this work? Did anyone ask Snipes when he came up with this line? Like, you know people just ice skate on flat surfaces, right? They don't ice skate uphill. Like, who have you seen ice skate uphill? Like, can you just say people shouldn't be doing things that they do? Like, I don't know. I still don't get it to this day, but whatever.
Some motherfuckers are always trying to ice skate uphill.